Conflict, avoiding conflict. When you avoid conflict, I hate to say this, but it's going to make you feel weak and it's going to make you look weak. And the reason it's going to happen is because when you're not acting with courage, you're basically acting as a coward. And when you have conflict and you don't enter into the conflict and you avoid the conflict, that is making you feel and look weak to the people around you. Now, the problem is most of us don't really know how to do conflict, and that's okay. Nobody really taught us how to do that. But sometimes we have to have difficult conversations with people. And whenever this happens, typically, at least for me, there is this moment of trying to avoid that. I don't want to make somebody else feel uncomfortable. I don't want somebody else to hurt. I don't want somebody else to be upset with me. And I think that's probably the number one reason why for so many years, I avoided conflict like the plague. And unfortunately, all that did was start to eat away at my self-esteem because I was being weak. I felt weak. And the more I felt weak, the more I was practicing hiding my truth. And the result of that was I just became a big fat liar. I just never spoke my truth. I was a chameleon. I just agreed with everybody, whatever was going on. And all that did was breed resentments inside of me. If avoiding conflict is something that you struggle with, don't worry, you're not alone. And I want to tell you and give you some ideas and tips, actually 4 things that you can do to start working through conflict and embracing conflict. I was just talking with a client and he was telling me about this conversation that he needs to have. And it's a difficult conversation and he wants to avoid it. He wasn't sure what to say and he didn't want to hurt the person. He didn't want to, and he was going through all these scenarios of, if I say this, then they're going to act this way. But if I say that, then they're going to act this way. And if I do this, then they're going to act that way. And so as we were talking through this, kind of occurred to me that there are a few principles that I often employ in my own life when I know that there's a difficult conversation to have. And so that's what I want to give you today and talk about today are these 4 steps. The first one is seeing conflict as an opportunity to strengthen your courage. One of my primary virtues is the virtue of courage. I want to be a courageous man. In fact, my name, Chuck, actually means strong and courageous. I've never really embraced that. I've always been, the coward, the one that shrinks back. But the more I practice courage, the more I step into the idea that, okay, you're going to be afraid, feel the fear and just push through it. Do the thing that you're afraid of. That every time you do that, it's taken another rep of building that courage muscle. So number 1 is just embrace the fear, embrace this conflict as an opportunity for you to grow as a man in your character and in your connection with others. It's actually an opportunity for communication. Because conflict, what all conflict is essentially, I have a need, you have a need, and these needs compete. And I'm afraid that if I meet your need, my need isn't going to be met. And if your need's met, if I meet your need, then my need won't be met. You know what I'm saying? That's what conflict is. And if we approach it as a conversation, it takes a lot of the fear out of it. The second thing I usually ask people when they're struggling with what they want to say or how they want to say it, I'll say, what's the truth? Like the pure truth here. What is the truth? Say it without any filters. And they'll say, what I want to say is when you did XYZ, I felt hurt. Or when you made this gesture, I felt disrespected. Okay. And I'm like, okay, that's a great place to start. Okay. That is your truth. The truth is, this is how I experienced what's going on. This is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that if we do this, my needs aren't going to be met. I'm afraid that if my needs aren't met, then I'm going to feel resentful. Step number 2 is ask yourself, what's the truth? And then you can start to massage that a little bit, because if you just come out with a sword and you say, here's the truth, you're going to submit to that. That's not going to turn out very well. And that sort of leads me to step number 3 is speak your truth with kindness. You can always speak kindness and you can always speak truth. The poet Rumi said, before you say anything, run it through these 3 filters. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? And I think that if I have something to say that I feel burdened that I need to say, then it's necessary. And if it's true, then I need to express my truth. And I have to do it with kindness. Stand in your truth with kindness. And that leads us to number 4, which is just acknowledge that this is probably going to be messy. So when you start a conversation, you could say, hey, I need to talk to you about something. This is probably going to be messy. I'm not going to say it very well. In fact, I might even say things that offend you, and that's not my intention. But I also feel like if I don't say this, that I'm going to feel a sense of obligation to myself for not saying it. Just acknowledge the fact that it's going to be messy. And I think by acknowledging, hey, yeah, this is going to be a little messy, what that does is it humanizes the whole conversation. So you can have conflict strategically by practicing these 4 steps, right? Step number 1, embrace the fear. I'm looking at my notes. Step number 2, what's the truth? And step number 3, stand in your truth with kindness. And step number 4, just acknowledge that it's going to be messy. One of the things that I've realized in my life is that oftentimes I have a hard time speaking my truth because I'm afraid that my truth is going to be rejected. I'm afraid that other people aren't going to want to hear what I have to say. I'm afraid that people won't like me if I tell the truth. And what I've found is actually the opposite happens. When I speak my truth, when I do it in kindness, and I do it in such a way that it's collaborative, 9 times out of 10, that conversation goes through a process and we're able to work through the conflict and come out on the other side. And there's something beautiful about being able to enter into conflict and work through the entire thing and come out on the other side closer than you were before. That I think is just a beautiful piece of our human nature. That by going through conflict, we actually create closeness with each other. Don't be afraid of conflict. Instead, just embrace it. Anyway, those are my 4 tips for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then subscribe it and share it. It really helps the algorithm, helps this channel grow, helps other people get these messages. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.